I cut ties with my entitled parents who neglected me in favor of my golden child brother. My name is Alana, and at 32 years old, I never expected my parents to show up at my doorstep in Portland after 7 years of silence. Growing up in Seattle, I was always the outsider in my own family, labeled as the mediocre child compared to my brilliant brother Ethan. For years, my parents accused my mother of having an affair, claiming I wasn't a real Harris because I wasn't exceptional enough. Now they're back with shocking news that changes everything. Before I tell you how I finally stood my ground, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to create boundaries with toxic family. Some of my earliest memories from age 4 or 5 already included the feeling that something was different about how my parents treated me. We lived in a beautiful upper-middle-class home in the Seattle suburbs with perfectly manicured lawns and a view of Mount Rainier on clear days. My father, James, worked as a software engineer for one of the big tech companies, bringing home an impressive salary that afforded us a comfortable lifestyle. My mother, Diana, was the quintessential homemaker, her perfectionism evident in everything from our spotless home to the gourmet meals she prepared each evening. Then there was my brother Ethan, 2 years older than me and seemingly blessed with every intellectual gift possible. By age 3, he was already reading simple books, amazing our parents and their friends with his precociousness. I can still picture my father hoisting Ethan onto his shoulders at family gatherings, proudly announcing, "My son read an entire book today. He's going to be the next Bill Gates." Meanwhile, I was just regular. Not exceptional, not struggling, just a normal kid who liked to play and draw. But in the Harris household, normal wasn't good enough. I remember my first day of kindergarten. I was so excited about my new light-up sneakers and butterfly backpack. As Mum helped me get dressed, I chatted excitedly about meeting new friends and playing on the playground. But her attention kept drifting to Ethan's room, where Dad was helping him put final touches on a science project for his second grade class. It was some kind of solar system model with planets that actually rotated. "Mum, do you think my teacher will like my drawings?" I asked, seeking some reassurance. "What? Oh, sure, honey. Now let me check on Ethan's project. We need to make sure it's perfect for his presentation today." I stood in my room alone, my excitement slightly dimmed. It was a pattern that would repeat countless times over the years. As kindergarten progressed, my teacher noticed I had a natural artistic ability beyond what was typical for my age. During a parent-teacher conference, Mrs. Wilson showed my parents a detailed drawing I had done of our family. "Alana has remarkable spatial awareness and attention to detail," she explained, pointing out the proportions and expressions I had captured. "She might have real artistic talent worth nurturing." My father glanced at the drawing and handed it back. "That's just doodling. How are her reading assessments? Is she keeping up with the curriculum?" "She's right on track academically," Mrs. Wilson assured them. "Average to above average in most areas." I saw my parents exchange a look I would come to know well. Average wasn't good enough in the Harris family. "Ethan was reading chapter books by her age," my mother said with a tight smile. "We expect Alana will catch up soon." I wasn't in the room for this conversation, but Mrs. Wilson gently relayed parts of it when she gave me extra time during art periods. She became the first in a line of teachers who would try to advocate for me. I tried everything to gain my parents' attention and approval. When I brought home an A on a spelling test, my father nodded absently and asked if I had seen the article about Ethan in the school newsletter. When I learned to ride a bike without training wheels, my mother took a quick photo before hurrying off to drive Ethan to his advanced math tutoring session. Christmas when I was 7 stands out in my memory with painful clarity. Ethan unwrapped a new computer, a microscope set, and dozens of books. My parents beamed as he expressed gratitude for each gift, praising his mature thank yous. When it was my turn, I received practical items, new socks, a school backpack for the next year, a math workbook to help me catch up. The one bright spot was a small set of watercolors hidden at the back of the tree, a gift from Ethan himself. That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching the watercolor set and wondering why my parents couldn't love me the same way they loved my brother. I didn't understand yet that the problem wasn't me. It never had been. As I entered middle school, the divide in our family grew even more pronounced. Ethan, now in high school, was thriving in every way. He had been placed in all advanced classes and was participating in academic competitions across the state. My parents hired private tutors to help him prepare for these events, spending hours reviewing his work and celebrating each victory as though it were a national championship. Meanwhile, I struggled with math. Not because I wasn't intelligent, but because the teaching style didn't match how I learned. When I asked my parents for help, my father sighed deeply. Just look at the examples in the book, Alana. It's not that difficult. Ethan never needed help with basic algebra. When I asked if I could get a tutor like Ethan, my mother dismissed the idea. Tutors are expensive, and Ethan needs them for his advanced studies. You should be able to handle regular classes on your own. I stopped asking for help and started spending lunch periods with my math teacher, Mrs. Gonzalez, who patiently explained concepts in ways that made sense to me. By the end of the year, I had raised my grade from a C to a B+. When I showed my parents my report card, my father glanced at it and asked, "Where's the A?" That same year, I entered an art contest on Mrs. Gonzalez's suggestion and won first place for my age group. My watercolor painting of the Seattle skyline at sunset was selected to be displayed at a local community center. The award ceremony was scheduled for a Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. "Can we all go to see me get my award?" I asked at dinner the week before. My mother checked the family calendar hanging on the refrigerator. "Oh, that's the same night as Ethan's academic decathlon. We can't miss that it's the regional finals." "But this is important to me," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "It's just a little art show, honey," my father said. "Ethan's competition could lead to scholarship opportunities. You understand, right?" I nodded because what else could I do? Mrs. Gonzalez attended the ceremony instead and took photos of me accepting my certificate. She framed one and gave it to me as a gift. It never made it onto our family photo wall, which was dominated by images of Ethan holding various trophies and medals. Our family photos told the story of our family dynamics without a single word. In nearly every picture, Ethan stood front and center, often with our parents' hands proudly on his shoulders. I was usually positioned off to the side, sometimes partially cut off from the frame. In our annual Christmas cards, the accompanying letter would detail Ethan's accomplishments for 2 paragraphs, before mentioning in a brief sentence that Alana is also doing well in school. Family dinners became a showcase for Ethan's achievements. My parents would eagerly ask about his day, listening intently as he described complex projects or classroom discussions. When they finally turned to me with a perfunctory, "And how was your day, Alana?" they would often start clearing dishes or checking their phones before I could finish speaking. It was around this time that I developed a close friendship with our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Jackson. A retired art teacher, she noticed me sketching in our front yard one afternoon and stopped to chat. She invited me to her home, which was filled with books on art and her own paintings. For the first time, someone was genuinely interested in my creative efforts. She taught me techniques, loaned me books, and provided the encouragement my parents never did. "You have a unique perspective, Alana," she told me. "Your use of color shows how deeply you feel the world around you." It was during these middle school years that I first overheard the conversation that would haunt me for decades. I had come home early from a friend's house due to a stomachache and was heading upstairs when I heard my parents arguing in the kitchen. "Look at her report card compared to Ethan's." My father's voice was tight with frustration. "How can they be so different if they have the same parents?" "She doesn't have the Harris brains, Diana. Sometimes I wonder—" "Don't you dare finish that sentence, James," my mother hissed. "How dare you accuse me of— That's absurd." "Is it?" "She looks nothing like my side of the family. She has none of our academic abilities. What am I supposed to think? She's your daughter. She's just different." Different is one thing, but this different. My brothers and I were all top of our classes. Your sisters were both valedictorians. And then there's Alana bringing home B-minuses and spending all her time drawing pictures. I froze on the stairs, a cold feeling washing over me. My father thought I wasn't his. My mother was defending herself, but not really defending me. Neither of them was saying what should have been obvious, that I had value exactly as I was. I crept back down the stairs and out the front door, walking straight to Mrs. Jackson's house, where I spent the afternoon helping her garden, saying nothing about what I'd heard. I didn't understand everything in that conversation, but I understood enough to know it would hurt too much to fully process. I began developing coping mechanisms. I spent as much time as possible at friends' houses observing how their parents interacted with them and their siblings. I noticed that in most families, parents celebrated each child's unique strengths rather than comparing them constantly. I watched fathers proudly display mediocre sports trophies and mothers who hung elementary artwork on refrigerators for years. I saw siblings who competed sometimes but supported each other always. My 13th birthday revealed just how little my parents thought of me. They forgot about it until the day before, resulting in a hastily planned pizza dinner with no decorations and a store-bought cake with my name misspelled. Just 2 months earlier, Ethan's 15th birthday had been a catered-ass affair with personalised decorations and a guest list of 30 friends and relatives. As the candles flickered on my cake, I made a wish that someday I would find people who valued me for who I actually was. By the time I entered high school, I had developed a fierce determination to find my own identity separate from my family's dysfunction. On the first day of freshman year, I signed up for every art class available and joined both the art club and the theatre program. These spaces became my sanctuaries, filled with people who appreciated creativity and emotional expression. My art teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, recognized my potential immediately. "You have a unique voice, Alana," she told me after seeing my first portfolio submission. "Your technique needs refinement, but your perspective is already developed in a way I rarely see in students your age." For the first time, I felt truly seen. Under Ms. Rodriguez's guidance, I experimented with different mediums and styles. She stayed after school to teach me advanced techniques and recommended books that opened my mind to new artistic possibilities. While my parents invested thousands in Ethan's academic enrichment, I worked weekends at a local coffee shop to pay for art supplies that my parents deemed unnecessary expenses. "Why do you need professional-grade acrylics?" my mother asked when I requested them for Christmas. "The student sets are much more reasonable for someone just doing this as a hobby." "It's not a hobby to me," I tried to explain. "The pigment quality makes a real difference in my work." She simply shook her head and changed the subject to Ethan's latest academic achievement. In my sophomore year, I auditioned for the school play and landed the lead role in Our Town. I rushed home with the news, feeling a glimmer of hope that perhaps a concrete achievement like this might finally earn my parents' attention. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, barely looking up from the college brochures she was reviewing with Ethan, already planning his applications, though he was only a senior. "The performances are the last weekend in March," I added. "I'll get you tickets." "We'll try to make it," my father said non-committally. To my surprise, they did attend opening night. My heart soared when I spotted them in the audience. Perhaps things were changing, but midway through the second act, I noticed their seats were empty. Later I learned they had left early to attend a science fair, where Ethan's project was being displayed. He had texted them about last-minute judging, and they hadn't hesitated to walk out on my performance. Strangely, it was Ethan who apologized to me the next day. "I'm sorry they left your play," he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I told them they should stay. I didn't need them there for judging." It was one of the first moments I realized that Ethan was becoming aware of the favoritism too. As he grew older, he occasionally made awkward attempts to include me or deflect some of our parents' excessive attention. But the pattern was too deeply entrenched for these small gestures to make much difference. As junior year approached, the contrast in how our parents treated our futures became impossible to ignore. Ethan, now at Harvard on a partial scholarship, was held up as the family's crowning achievement. Every call with him was on speakerphone, so both parents could participate, and his academic accomplishments were announced to everyone from close family friends to checkout clerks at the grocery store. Meanwhile, my growing portfolio and improving techniques were barely acknowledged. When I brought home my SAT scores, which were actually quite good, my father's first response was, "Well, they're not as high as Ethan's, but I suppose they're respectable." I had already decided I wanted to apply to art schools with a particular dream of attending the Rhode Island School of Design. When I brought up college applications at dinner one evening, my mother looked startled. "Oh, I suppose we should start thinking about that. Have you considered the community college? It would be much more affordable." "Actually, I've been researching art schools," I said, sliding a brochure across the table. "RISD has an amazing program, and Ms. Rodriguez thinks I have a chance with my portfolio." My father didn't even pick up the brochure. "Art school. Alana, be realistic. Those schools are expensive, and what kind of career would that lead to? Ethan will be graduating with a degree that guarantees a 6-figure starting salary. I could get scholarships," I argued. "And there are plenty of careers in art and design that pay well. We're not spending college money on an art degree," my father said firmly. "If that's what you want, you'll need to figure out how to pay for it yourself." That night, I learned another devastating truth. While my parents claimed they couldn't afford to support my college education, they had established a trust fund for Ethan years ago. In addition to his scholarship, he had a fully funded account covering tuition, housing, books, and even graduate school if he chose to continue. Nothing comparable existed for me. The final breaking point of my high school years came during a family dinner shortly before graduation. My father had been drinking more than usual, celebrating some award Ethan had received. As the evening wore on, his comments became increasingly cutting toward me. "You know, Diana," he said, gesturing with his wine glass. "I've had a lot of time to think about this. There's just no way Alana is my biological daughter." The table went silent. Even though I had overheard similar insinuations over the years, he had never stated it so bluntly in front of me. "James, stop," my mother said, looking nervously between us. "No, I want to know the truth," he continued, staring at her accusingly. "Was there someone else? Because there is no Harris family DNA in this girl. No Harris has ever been average. No Harris has ever been satisfied with mediocrity." I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Is that what you think I am, mediocre?" "Look at the evidence, Oslo," he slurred. "Ethan was solving complex math problems at 12. You were drawing pictures. He's at Harvard. You're hoping for art school." "James, that's enough," my mother interjected, but it was too little too late. "You know what's actually mediocre?" I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. Parents who can only value one type of intelligence. Parents who make one child feel worthless because they don't fit some narrow definition of success. I walked out of the dining room and locked myself in my bedroom, my heart pounding with a mixture of hurt rage and strangely relief. Finally, the unspoken had been spoken. The suspicion that had shadowed my childhood was out in the open. Neither of my parents came to check on me that night. The next morning, they behaved as though nothing had happened, a familiar pattern of sweeping unpleasantness under the rug. But something had changed inside me. I began to see that the problem had never been my mediocrity. The problem was their inability to see and value anything that didn't fit their preconceived notions of success. I graduated high school with honours in art, my name called with special recognition for winning several regional competitions. As I crossed the stage, I could see my parents in the audience, clapping politely, but without the enthusiastic cheering they had shown for Ethan. It didn't matter anymore. I was done seeking their approval. After high school, the reality of my parents' refusal to support my education hit hard. While my classmates prepared for college with family shopping trips for dorm supplies and emotional send-offs, I was working double shifts at the coffee shop and applying for every scholarship I could find. I couldn't afford the prestigious art schools of my dreams, but I managed to secure enough financial aid to attend the state university with a solid, if not world-famous art program. To make ends meet, I worked 3 part-time jobs. Mornings at the coffee shop near campus, evenings at the university library, and weekends assisting a local photographer with weddings and events. During my sophomore year, I met Tyler in a colour theory class. He was studying graphic design and recognized my work from a student exhibition. "Your use of colour is extraordinary, Alt," he said after class one day. "Especially that series with the fragmented landscapes. It's like you're showing how memory distorts places from childhood." I was startled by how accurately he had interpreted what I was trying to express. We began dating shortly after, and for the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be truly valued by someone. Tyler celebrated my artistic vision and encouraged me to push boundaries in my work. When I received positive feedback from professors, he insisted we go out to celebrate, even if it was just for ice cream on our tight student budgets. It was during a psychology course I took as an elective that I began to recognize the toxic dynamics of my family. The professor discussed concepts like the golden child and scapegoat in family systems and emotional neglect as a form of abuse. As she described these patterns, I felt as though she were recounting my life story. After class, I broke down in tears while talking to the professor. She gently recommended the university's counselling centre, which offered sessions on a sliding scale fee. Those therapy sessions became another cornerstone of my healing, helping me understand that what I had experienced wasn't normal or acceptable, and certainly wasn't my fault. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents grew increasingly distant. I would occasionally send them samples of my work, hoping that time and distance might have softened their perspective. My mother would send brief non-committal responses. "That's nice, dear. Hope your classes are going well." My father rarely responded at all. During one visit home, I discovered that my mother had stored all my artwork in cardboard boxes in the garage, while Ethan's academic awards and Harvard memorabilia were prominently displayed throughout the house. When I mentioned this, my mother seemed genuinely confused. "I thought you'd want to keep those pieces," she said. "I was saving them for you." "Most parents display their children's accomplishments," I pointed out. like you do with everything Ethan has ever achieved. That's different, she replied automatically. How? She had no answer. Ethan was thriving at Harvard, and every conversation with my parents inevitably turned to his latest achievements. Did you hear Ethan's research project was selected for publication? Ethan's professor thinks he should consider a PhD program. Ethan's been invited to a conference in London. I began limiting my calls home to once a month, then once every few months. Each conversation left me feeling diminished and invisible. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving of my junior year. My parents had invited extended family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins I rarely saw. During dinner, my father, loosened by several glasses of wine, began regaling the table with Ethan's accomplishments at Harvard. My cousin innocently asked about my studies, providing an opening for me to share some positive news. Actually, one of my paintings was selected for the university's permanent collection, I said. It's going to be displayed in the new student centre. Before anyone could respond, my father interjected. Speaking of achievements, did I mention Ethan's research paper is being published in an academic journal? As the meal progressed, my uncle, perhaps noticing my quiet withdrawal, asked more about my art. My father interrupted again this time, with something that crossed a line. Oh, Alana has always been creative, he said with a dismissive wave. We're still not entirely sure where she gets it from, certainly not the Harris side of the family. He laughed as though he'd made a harmless joke, but the implication was clear. To my surprise, it was Ethan who spoke up. He was home for the holiday, sitting across from me at the table. Dad, that's enough, he said firmly. Alana's accomplishments deserve respect. Her work is exceptional, and you would know that if you ever bothered to really look at it. The table fell uncomfortably silent. I was just making a joke, my father said defensively. No, you weren't, Ethan replied. You were doing what you always do, implying Alana isn't good enough and hinting she's not really part of this family. It needs to stop. My mother tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. The tension lingered throughout the remainder of the meal, and I excused myself as soon as possible, retreating to my old bedroom. Ethan knocked on my door later that evening. I'm sorry, he said. I should have said something years ago. It's not your responsibility, I told him. Maybe not, but I benefited from their favoritism. I knew it wasn't right, but it was easier to accept the attention than to question it. That conversation marked the beginning of a new relationship with my brother, one built on mutual respect rather than the artificial hierarchy our parents had created. While he returned to Harvard and I to my university, we began communicating regularly without our parents as intermediaries. After that, Thanksgiving, I made the decision to limit my contact with my parents even further. I focused instead on building my own life, pouring my emotional energy into my art, and nurturing the relationships that actually sustained me. I graduated college with distinction in fine arts. My parents attended the ceremony but complained about the parking, the length of the program, and the uncomfortable seats. When my name was called with special honours, they clapped politely but showed none of the enthusiastic pride they had displayed for Ethan. A month after graduation, I had my first professional gallery showing in a small but respected venue. It was a group exhibition featuring emerging artists, and 2 of my pieces were prominently displayed near the entrance. I invited my parents, knowing they would likely decline, and was unsurprised when my mother called to say they couldn't make it because Ethan was presenting his research at a conference that weekend. What did surprise me was how little their absence hurt. I was surrounded by friends, professors who had mentored me and Tyler, all genuinely celebrating my achievement. For the first time, I fully understood that I didn't need my parents' validation to know my worth. As my work began receiving positive reviews in local arts publications, I found myself gaining confidence, not just in my artistic abilities, but in my right to be treated with respect. When my 25th birthday approached, Tyler organised a small celebration at our favourite restaurant with close friends. On an impulse, I invited my parents, hoping that the public setting might prevent the usual dynamics. They accepted, which surprised me. My father spent the first half hour talking about Ethan's graduate program and job prospects, until one of my friends pointedly changed the subject to ask about my recent commission for a corporate headquarters. Later, as dessert was being served, I finally found the courage to address the elephant in the room. I want to talk about our relationship, I said to my parents. For as long as I can remember, you've treated Ethan and me completely differently. You've celebrated every achievement of his while dismissing mine. That's not true, my mother said immediately. We've always supported both of you. financially supporting my art education, attending my exhibitions, displaying my work in your home, talking about my accomplishments to family and friends. When have you done any of that? You're being dramatic, my father said dismissively, and ungrateful for everything we have done for you. What exactly should I be grateful for? I asked. The constant comparison to Ethan, the implications that I'm not really your daughter, the complete lack of interest in my chosen field. We put a roof over your head and food on the table, he responded. Many parents do far less. Basic necessities aren't the only things children need, I said. My voice steady despite my racing heart. They need to be valued. They need to be seen. This is ridiculous, my father said, throwing his napkin on the table. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked after paying for this expensive dinner. Hey, Apai, Tyler paid for dinner, I corrected him. And this isn't an attack. It's a long overdue conversation. Well, I don't see the point, he said, standing up. If you want to wallow in self-pity over imagined slights, that's your choice. But I won't participate. As they prepared to leave, my father delivered the final blow. Maybe if you'd shown half the potential Ethan did, things would have been different. But the truth is, I've never been convinced you're actually my daughter. You're nothing like our family. My mother gasped, but said nothing to contradict him. Her silence was its own kind of betrayal. After they left, I sat in stunned silence, surrounded by my concerned friends. Tyler held my hand tightly under the table. I think I need to cut them out of my life, I said finally. Completely. That night, I wrote an email to both my parents explaining that I would no longer be in contact with them. I outlined the years of emotional neglect, the favoritism and the paternity accusations, stating clearly that I deserved better treatment than they had offered. I ended by saying I was open to reconciliation in the future, but only if they acknowledged the harm they had caused and committed to changing their behavior. I never received a reply. After cutting ties with my parents, I threw myself into building a life that reflected my values and nurtured my spirit. I moved to Portland, Oregon, drawn by its vibrant art community and the opportunity for a fresh start far from Seattle. The physical distance provided emotional space to process my grief, because cutting family ties, even toxic ones, is still a form of loss that requires mourning. Portland welcomed me with open arms. I found a tiny studio apartment above a bookstore in the Alberta Arts District and converted half the space into a painting studio. The neighbourhood's monthly art walks gave me opportunities to display my work and connect with other local artists. Slowly, I began developing a distinctive style that merged abstract expressionism with subtle landscape elements, processing my emotional journey through colour and form. 6 months after my move, a local gallery owner spotted my work during an art walk and invited me to participate in a group show. The exhibition, titled New Perspectives, featured emerging artists pushing boundaries in various mediums. My series of 5 interconnected canvases depicting fragmented childhood memories received significant attention, including a mention in Portland's Arts Weekly. That opening night changed the trajectory of my career and my personal life. Not only did I sell 3 paintings, but I also met Michael, an architect, with a deep appreciation for fine art. He approached me with thoughtful questions about my technique and the emotional underpinnings of my work. Unlike many people who viewed my paintings as simply beautiful, Michael immediately understood the layers of meaning. There's joy in these brushstrokes, he said, pointing to vibrant yellow swirls in one corner, but it's always contained, held back by these rigid lines, as if happiness was allowed only in prescribed spaces. His insight took my breath away. We ended up talking until the gallery closed, then continued our conversation at a nearby coffee shop until midnight. Our connection was immediate and deep, based on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's passions. As my relationship with Michael bloomed, so did my artistic career. Local commissions led to regional recognition, which opened doors to larger galleries. I developed a signature technique of layering translucent colors to create depth that seemed to shift with changing light, symbolic of how perspectives can transform with new understanding. Through therapy and artistic expression, I processed the complex emotions surrounding my family estrangement. Some days brought anger so intense I applied paint with violent strokes, creating chaotic canvases that I later reworked into balanced compositions, a physical manifestation of finding harmony after turmoil. Other days brought a deep sadness that translated into muted blues and purples colors of mourning and reflection. Throughout this time, I maintained limited contact with Ethan. Our relationship had transformed from the artificially hierarchical one our parents created into something more authentic. We communicated primarily through email and occasional phone calls, carefully rebuilding trust that had been damaged by years of parental manipulation. Through Ethan, I learnt bits of information about our parents. They were confused and angry about my decision to cut contact, telling family members I was being overly sensitive and dramatic. Cut! They refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, casting themselves as victims of an ungrateful daughter. They really don't get it, Ethan told me during one call. Dad still makes comments about you being different from the rest of the family, but now he frames it as you being artistic, like it's some kind of alien trait. Have they ever asked how I'm doing, if I'm okay? I asked. His silence was answer enough. Ethan's own relationship with our parents began to change as he viewed their behavior through the lens of our conversations. He set boundaries around how they spoke about me and began to notice patterns of conditional love in how they treated him as well. They only call when I have good news to share, he observed. If I'm struggling with something, they change the subject or offer platitudes instead of support. I never noticed it before. 3 years after moving to Portland, my career reached a significant milestone when the Pacific Northwest Arts Journal featured my work in a 4-page spread. The article, titled Emotional Landscapes, The Rising Star of Alana Harris, included photos of my most recent exhibition and an in-depth interview about my artistic process. The journalist had asked about my background and influences, and I had spoken candidly about how family dynamics shaped my artistic vision, without mentioning specific details about the estrangement. That same year, Michael and I moved in together, finding a spacious apartment with room for my growing studio needs. Our home became everything my childhood house was not: warm. With conversation filled with books and art and brimming with mutual support. We hosted dinner parties where discussions flowed freely, everyone's voice valued equally. Friends often commented on the comfortable energy of our home, unaware of how deliberately I had cultivated an environment opposite to the cold, achievement-oriented atmosphere of my childhood. On my 30th birthday, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to the Oregon coast. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony in the Japanese garden, surrounded by close friends and a few chosen family members. Ethan attended, having flown in from Boston, where he now worked as a research scientist. Our parents were not invited, a decision that brought both sadness and relief. Our honeymoon took us to France, where we spent 3 weeks exploring art museums in Paris and small villages in Provence. I filled sketchbooks with impressions and ideas inspired by the light architecture and centuries of artistic tradition. Upon our return, I began my most ambitious project, yet a series examining the concept of chosen family versus biological bonds. This series, titled Kinship, caught the attention of a prestigious gallery in Seattle. The irony of achieving recognition in the city I had fled was not lost on me. The gallery owner invited me to mount a solo exhibition, my first in a major venue. As the exhibition date approached, I felt increasing anxiety about returning to Seattle, knowing my parents might learn of the show. I discussed the possibility with my therapist, who helped me develop strategies for maintaining boundaries if they appeared. The opening night of Kinship marked another turning point in my career. Art critics from major publications attended, and 3 pieces sold to significant collectors before the evening ended. I gave a brief talk about the inspiration behind the works, speaking confidently about the difference between family relationships based on obligation versus those built on genuine affection and respect. As I mingled with attendees afterward, I caught sight of a familiar face. Ethan had come without telling me, wanting to show support without creating pressure. He brought his girlfriend Emma, a pediatrician with a warm smile and kind eyes. Standing in front of my central piece, a large canvas depicting intertwined branches, representing chosen connections, Ethan embraced me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've created something extraordinary out of pain." "Have they seen the exhibition announcement?" I asked, knowing he would understand who I meant. "No," he replied. "They're traveling in Europe this month, but even if they were here, this night is about celebrating you, not worrying about them." As my professional success grew, so did my sense of inner peace. I opened my own small gallery in Portland, focusing not just on selling art, but on creating community programs that brought creative expression to underserved populations. I taught weekend workshops for children in foster care, seeing in their eager faces the same hunger for validation I had felt as a child. Michael and I created holiday traditions that emphasized connection rather than competition. We celebrated achievements big and small with equal enthusiasm. Our home became a gathering place for friends who, for various reasons, had complicated relationships with their biological families. 6.5 years after cutting ties with my parents, I had built a life filled with genuine love, creative fulfillment, and meaningful connections. The wound of my childhood had scarred, over still visible, but no longer causing daily pain. I had made peace with the reality that some parents are incapable of providing the emotional support their children need, and that creating boundaries is sometimes the healthiest choice. And then on an ordinary Sunday morning in April, the doorbell rang. The doorbell chimed at 9:15 on a peaceful Sunday morning. Michael and I were lingering over coffee and the newspaper discussing plans to visit the farmer's market later. Neither of us was expecting visitors. When I opened the front door, the shock of seeing my parents standing on the porch nearly caused me to slam it shut again. 7 years of no contact, and suddenly they were here, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. My father's hair had gone completely white, and he appeared frailer, his once commanding presence diminished. My mother's face showed new lines of worry, her nervous smile faltering as she registered my stunned expression. "Alana?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "May we come in, please?" I felt Michael appear behind me, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. "It's okay," I told him, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Let's talk in the living room." Leading them into our home felt surreal, like characters from a painful past novel suddenly materializing in my present reality. They sat awkwardly on our sofa, glancing around at the artwork that covered our walls, most of it my own creations. "Your home is beautiful," my mother offered tentatively. "Thank you," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "How did you find my address?" My father cleared his throat. "Ethan, he thought it was time. Ethan gave you my address." I felt a flicker of betrayal. "He made us promise to respect your boundaries," my mother quickly added. "He said we could try once, but if you asked us to leave, we would go and never come back." I made a mental note to call my brother later. "Why are you here after all this time?" They exchanged a look that contained decades of shared history, some silent communication passing between them. My father, once so domineering, now appeared hesitant, almost afraid. "We've seen your success, he began. "Your exhibitions, the articles in art magazines. We've followed your career from afar. We're very proud," my mother added, earning a sharp glance from me. "You don't get to be proud," I said quietly but firmly. "You didn't support my path. You actively discouraged it and dismissed my talent for years." My father nodded, surprising me. "You're right, and that's part of why we're here. But there's something else, something important you need to know." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed an envelope, his hands shaking slightly as he held it out to me. 6 months ago, I had some health concerns. My doctor recommended genetic testing for certain conditions that run in the Harris family. I took the envelope, but didn't open it already, guessing what it might contain. The results were conclusive, Alana. You are biologically my daughter, 100%. The room seemed to tilt slightly. After years of insinuations and outright accusations, after being treated as an outsider in my own family based on this suspicion, the revelation should have felt vindicating. Instead, it only highlighted the cruelty of their treatment. "So for over 20 years, you treated me like I didn't belong, because you wrongly assumed I wasn't a real Harris," I stated flatly. "It's more complicated than that." My mother said, her eyes filling with tears. "We were wrong, terribly wrong in so many ways." My father leaned forward, his expression more vulnerable than I had ever seen it. "I need to confess something that I've only recently come to understand about myself. When you showed artistic talent as a child, it frightened me." "Frightened you?" I repeated incredulously. He nodded. "I had artistic inclinations myself as a young man. My father ridiculed them mercilessly, called them useless and unmanly. He forced me into engineering and business courses, insisted creativity was for people who couldn't succeed in the real world." This was entirely new information. I had never known my father had any creative interests. "I buried that part of myself so deeply I forgot it existed," he continued. "When you started showing talent, it triggered something in me, some buried resentment. Instead of protecting you from what I experienced, I perpetuated it. I convinced myself you couldn't be my child because I couldn't face that I was punishing you for being like the part of myself I had been forced to abandon." His voice broke on the last words, and to my astonishment, he began to weep openly, something I had never witnessed in my entire life. My mother reached for his hand before turning back to me. "I have my own guilt to bear. I went along with the favoritism because it was easier than standing up to your father. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that you were strong and would be fine. She shook her head. I failed you as a mother. When James started questioning your paternity, I was so hurt and angry at the accusation that I focused on defending myself rather than protecting you. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process their words. For so long, I had imagined this confrontation, rehearsed what I would say if given the chance. Now that it was happening, I felt oddly detached, as if watching the scene from a distance. Why now? I finally asked. It's been 7 years. My father wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. Partly the DNA test, partly our own journey. We've been in therapy separately and together, trying to understand how we failed so badly as parents. Ethan has been brutally honest with us too, my mother added. After you cut contact, he began challenging our version of the past. He had journals he'd kept since high school documenting incidents we had conveniently forgotten or minimized. He made us see the truth, my father admitted. And then he gave us an ultimatum last year. Either we do the real work to become better people, or he would distance himself as well. We've lost so much time with you, my mother said softly. 7 years of your life we can never get back. We know we don't deserve forgiveness, Alana. We're not asking for that. What are you asking for? I questioned, still guarded. A chance, my father replied simply. A chance to know the remarkable woman you've become on whatever terms you set. A chance to try to make amends, though we know we can never fully repair the damage we caused. I looked at Michael, finding strength in his steady presence. I need time to think about this, I said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course, my mother said, quickly reaching into her purse. She placed a business card on the coffee table. Our new phone numbers and email addresses. The ball is entirely in your court, Alana. If you decide you want no contact, we'll respect that. As they stood to leave, my father paused, looking at a large canvas hanging over our fireplace. It was one of my favorite pieces, a swirling composition of deep blues and golds depicting the emotional landscape of finding one's true home. This is extraordinary, he said quietly. I can feel both turmoil and peace in it simultaneously. You have a gift I never properly acknowledged. After they left, I collapsed onto the sofa, emotionally exhausted. Michael sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Are you okay? He asked gently. I don't know, I answered honestly. I never expected them to acknowledge what they did, let alone apologize for it. Do you believe them? I considered the question carefully. I think so. They seem genuinely remorseful, but I don't know if that changes anything. So much damage has been done. You don't have to decide anything right now, Michael reminded me. Take all the time you need. After they left, I broke down completely, years of emotion flooding through me in uncontrollable waves. It wasn't just about the DNA test confirming what should have been assumed all along. It was about finally receiving acknowledgement of the pain I had experienced, validation that the problem had never been my mediocrity, but their inability to see beyond their own narrow definitions of worth. In the weeks following my parents' unexpected visit, I found myself on an emotional roller coaster. Some days I felt angry all over again, reliving memories that the encounter had stirred up. Other days I felt a cautious curiosity about the possibility of a different kind of relationship with them. Through it all, I relied on the support systems I had carefully built, my weekly therapy sessions, long conversations with Michael, and the solace of my art studio, where I could process complex feelings through color and form. You don't owe them forgiveness, my therapist reminded me during one particularly difficult session. Reconciliation is not an obligation, it's a choice you get to make based on what's healthiest for you. I created a new series of paintings during this period exploring themes of rupture and repair. Working with broken pieces of canvas that I stitched back together before applying paint, I found a physical manifestation for the concept of healing that remains visibly marked by past injury. 2 months after their visit, I finally felt ready to respond. I suggested meeting at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant near the Japanese garden where we could talk privately. They agreed immediately, responding to my email within minutes, as if they had been waiting by their computers for my reply. Michael offered to accompany me, but I decided this was something I needed to do alone. I'll be right down the street at the coffee shop, he promised. One text and I'll be there in 2 minutes. When I arrived at the restaurant, my parents were already seated at a corner table. They both stood when they saw me, nervous smiles on their faces. The awkwardness was palpable as we exchanged stilted greetings and settled into our seats. Thank you for agreeing to meet, my mother began. "We've thought about you every day." I nodded, but didn't immediately respond, taking a moment to organize my thoughts. Before we go any further, I need to be clear about something. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it has to be on entirely new terms. I won't subject myself to the dynamics of the past. "We understand," my father said solemnly. "We're not the same people we were. At least we're trying not to be." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. My father took a deep breath. "For me, it's meant facing my own failed dreams and how I projected that failure onto you. It's meant acknowledging the emotional abuse, because that's what it was, and taking full responsibility without excuses. It's meant learning about different forms of intelligence and success beyond the narrow definitions I was raised with." My mother added, "For me, it's meant confronting my role as an enabler. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but I was actually perpetuating harm. I've had to learn what healthy boundaries look like and how to stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable." They spoke about their individual and couples therapy, the books they had read about emotional neglect and healing family relationships, and the painful process of confronting decades of harmful patterns. "Ethan has been brutally honest with us," my mother admitted. "He showed us your childhood art that he had saved, things we had dismissed, looking at them now with open eyes." Her voice broke. "The talent was always so obvious. We were blind by choice." Tights. "I need to know something," I said. "If the DNA test had shown I wasn't biologically related to you, would you still be here trying to reconcile?" They exchanged a look before my father answered. "I've asked myself that same question. I want to believe we would, that our journey of understanding would have happened regardless. But honestly, I don't know." The test was a shock that cracked open my denial. I'm ashamed that it took something so concrete to make me face the truth that should have been obvious in 1,000 other ways. I appreciated his honesty, uncomfortable as it was. "We know we can't erase the past," my mother said. "We can't give you back the childhood you deserved or undo the harm we caused. All we can do is offer a different relationship now if you're willing." I considered their words carefully before responding. "I'm not ready to jump into regular family gatherings or holidays, but I'm willing to try small steps. Perhaps monthly dinners to start, with clear boundaries." The relief on their faces was palpable. "Whatever you're comfortable with," my father said. "We'll follow your lead." Over the following months, we established a cautious new pattern of interaction. Our monthly dinners were initially stilted and occasionally tense when difficult topics arose. But gradually, as my parents consistently respected my boundaries and demonstrated genuine interest in my life and work, the conversations became easier. 4 months into our new relationship, my father's health took a concerning turn. What had initially prompted the genetic testing proved to be early-stage heart disease requiring surgery. The health scare brought a new dimension to our reconciliation process, highlighting the finite nature of time and the permanence of unresolved relationships. During his recovery, I found myself visiting their home for the first time in years. I was startled to discover my artwork prominently displayed in their living room. Not just recent pieces they had purchased from galleries, but early works from my college years that I had assumed were long discarded. "We found them in the garage," my mother explained when she noticed my surprise. "After you cut contact, we started looking through everything we had kept. It was like seeing your talent with new eyes." She paused. "We were so wrong, Alana, so terribly wrong." A particularly meaningful moment came when my father asked to visit my studio. Still recovering from surgery, he moved slowly as I showed him around the converted warehouse space where I created my largest works. He asked thoughtful questions about my techniques and inspirations, engaging with my art in a way he never had before. Standing before an in-progress canvas, he said quietly, "I had a studio once, nothing like this, just a corner of the garage in my parents' house. I used to paint late at night when everyone was asleep." He swallowed hard. "My father found my paintings when I was 18 and burned them in the backyard. Said it was time I grew up and focused on a real career." In that moment, I saw my father clearly, perhaps for the first time, not as the intimidating figure of my childhood, but as someone who had been wounded himself and had passed that wound along instead of healing it. "It's never too late to reclaim that part of yourself," I told him. The next week, I brought simple painting supplies to his house and set up a small workspace in their spare room. My relationship with my mother evolved in different ways. She began volunteering at the Community Arts Centre, where I taught workshops for children initially in administrative roles, but eventually assisting with the classes themselves. Watching her gentle encouragement of young artists trying new techniques, I glimpsed the mother she might have been had she found her own voice earlier. Meanwhile, Ethan and I continued strengthening our sibling bond. He had been right to encourage our parents to seek reconciliation, though I needed time to forgive him for sharing my address without permission. We talked openly about our shared childhood from our different perspectives, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of family dynamics. I felt guilty for being the favorite, he confessed during one conversation, but I was also afraid to lose that position. It was conditional love, and on some level, I always knew that. As the 1-year anniversary of my parents' reappearance approached, Michael and I hosted dinner at our home, a symbolic opening of my current life to include my past. The evening wasn't perfect. Small tensions still arose, old patterns threatened to emerge, but we all made conscious efforts to communicate differently. Looking around the table at my husband, my brother, and my parents, I felt something I had never expected to feel in their presence, a tentative peace. Not because the past had been erased, it never could be, but because we were all finally facing it honestly. The healing process continues daily. Some wounds remain tender to the touch, and I maintain firm boundaries to protect my well-being. Forgiveness hasn't meant forgetting or excusing, but rather freeing myself from the corrosive power of resentment, while still honoring the validity of my experience. The most profound lesson I've learned is that my worth was never determined by their ability to see it. The mediocrity they perceived was merely a failure of their vision, not a limitation of my value. In finding my own path, despite their lack of support, I discovered strengths I might never have known I possessed. I've come to understand that family can be both born and chosen, that biology is the beginning of a story but not its entire plot. The family I've built with Michael and close friends remains my primary emotional home, while my relationship with my parents continues as a work in progress, imperfect but evolving. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you too have experienced the pain of family dynamics that left you feeling unseen or unworthy. Know that your value exists independently of others' ability to recognize it. Creating boundaries isn't selfish, it's an act of self-preservation. And healing doesn't follow a straight line, it spirals back on itself, sometimes returning you to old pain before moving forward again. What would you do if someone who deeply hurt you came back seeking reconciliation? Would you give them another chance? Or maintain the boundaries that protected you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. Remember that creating a life that honors your authentic self is perhaps the most powerful form of reclamation. Thank you for witnessing my story.